The Nuclear Waste Policy Act of 1987 designated Yucca Mountain, Nevada, in Nye County as the first site to be characterized as a repository for spent nuclear fuel and radioactive waste. This video will demonstrate 25 years of research and experience collected by Clark County in its oversight program of the Yucca Mountain project.
The cards were stacked against us politically from the very outset, and this was a very political process. It had absolutely no relevance to science at all. I mean, in the final analysis, a decision was made in 1987 with the so-called Screw Nevada bill. The original thought was to look the entire country and look at the best possible geological formation. There was much discussion about granite in the northeast, salt dome formations in the southeast. Early on, it was decided because of political reasons not to select the northeast, the granite sites. And then I believe it was in the '84 campaign, they took the salt dome formations in the southeast off the table. So Nevada, in effect, was targeted, if you would, because of political considerations, not science. And I must say that the process became highly politicized because the driving force behind the high-level nuclear waste dump has always been the nuclear power industry. They've always had the whip hand in this, and they would be pushing the department to move forward. It was Attorney General McKay who had provided us with the legal advice that, look, if we accepted any of these inducements, that in effect the consequence of that would have been to waive our right in terms of oversight and challenge. So it's his advice, and I think a sound piece of advice, one that I've followed and has been followed by every governor and legislature since, is that you can't get sucked into that trap where you accept some money. It's modest, as I recall, it's like $10 million. The role of the Attorney General is absolutely key because these issues ultimately get involved in legal issues. And that's, of course, where we have been, in the many challenges that have been filed by the state over the past several decades. So the Attorney General's office has got to be a key player. We've been very fortunate, I think. The state has been well advised by the Attorneys General, both Democrat and Republican, since the Nuclear Waste Policy Act was signed into law by President Reagan back in 1983. So it's important that the Attorney General's office be very much in the loop. One of the good features, I should think, of the original legislation is the prohibition that a state could not be the temporary and the permanent. And the reason for that, in fairness to the framers of the Nuclear Waste Policy Act, they know, just as I'm arguing now, that what is temporary becomes permanent.
I learned very early on that you simply couldn't trust the Department of Energy or anyone in their employ to actually be scientifically honest, and it really became a political game very early on that went through the entire project. The rules and regulations meant nothing to them. The standards they would have changed if they got in the way. They were interested in getting the project done no matter what they had to do, legal or otherwise, to get it done. And so our strategy was fairly clear. We wanted to sort of try to drive their project by getting out early with our own research and making them respond to us, because we know once we got behind the 8 ball in terms of the amount of money they had and momentum, that we'd be playing catch up and trying to, which ultimately we did. But for a number of years we were driving the project through what we were doing and the kinds of things we were saying and the studies that we engaged in. We had very reputable scientists, and they submitted most of their work to peer-reviewed journals, which were looked on by other experts and favorably for almost the entire part. DOE wouldn't accept anything that the state had to say. They knew what we were trying to do, and that it would stop the project. And I'm sure their view was that we would do anything we could to stop it. We employed legal maneuvers, we employed scientific teams, we worked out it in the public arena through public relations programs and the like, and ultimately we were successful. This wasn't politicians driving the show. This was the public. By every measure we could find, our own polling, by newspaper polling, by other, it was the public who was telling the elected leaders, the politicians, what they wanted. And the politicians responded to that. And I know there's been allegations and accusations that somehow it was the politicians that were doing this for their own favor. But in fact, it was the opposite. It was really the public and the public we work for that actually drove the decisions we made and ultimately the policy the state adopted, because the public didn't want this project. The public didn't trust DOE. They didn't believe a word they said all the way along. And so I think we at the state level as well as the county level, we got our direction from the public, and it's the citizens of the state that are the victors and the ones who really drove the show and won the whole shooting match. And the trouble was that you just can't trust what they were saying and doing. And once you began trusting them and interacting with them, they incrementally led you along. And so my advice was never try to trust these guys no matter what. And in some sense, it was even larger than just the nuclear waste issue for Nevadans, because of the political nature of the program being driven by politics. We know that basically everything they wanted to do was political in trying to get there. And so I think Nevadans got into a mode more of, you can successfully fight City Hall or the federal government in this case. There's a lesson to be learned that if you're persistent, you don't buy into it, you don't trust them, you resist them all the way, you can beat federal projects like this you don't want, and you can fight City Hall. And even if you don't be successful in the end, you gather a certain amount of self-respect and a certain stature that you can be successful in these things. You just don't have to take every junk that they throw out there and they make it appear like it's insurmountable. Nothing is inevitable, and that we never believed the project was inevitable. I've never thought it would be built from square one.
It's different today because the Department of Energy and the state are on the same side trying to withdraw the license. But prior to that, the Department of Energy denied any strand of information that came out of the state of Nevada. They fought it. They objected to every contention the state of Nevada and the other affected units of local government submitted. And they kept saying, well, you'll get your day in court. If Yucca is actually licensed at some point and the country decides to go forward there, I think it's more important than ever for the state to have a role. However, the Nuclear Waste Policy Act does not really set up a role. The state would have to be very forceful in that. The Department of Energy has made promises to the state forever, starting with these nuclear bombs won't hurt anybody, all the way through. So the state really needs independent oversight of the project. The irony is our country is a couple hundred years old, but this stuff has to be safe for 100,000 years. So it's going to be very interesting to see what kind of long-term oversight that even the nation can do. So it's very important at the beginning to make sure that safety is the most important aspect of this, and you have to have independent oversight to do that. They picked a bad mountain. When they selected Yucca, it was because Nevada was politically weak and they already owned land, the Nevada test site, and they found a mountain in the corner of it and they said, okay, we'll make it work here. It wasn't because they had done extensive research. They characterized the mountain afterwards. So the state would then try in the licensing process to show that it was a bad location. If it goes forward after that, the state would ask the federal government for funds to do independent oversight to make sure it's a safe project. And if Yucca should go away, then certainly our nation needs a deep geologic repository somewhere. But I hope this time they do it on science and not on political convenience.
Well, the task force was formed just before Nevada was selected in what's called the Screw Nevada Bill in 1987 to become the only spot to be studied for a nation's high-level nuclear waste repository. We applied for a grant that was available from the state of Nevada to do public education, and we were awarded that and actually started working in about 88, probably 1989, really in earnest, traveling around the state. We were primarily inside of Nevada, telling people what the Yucca Mountain project was, what they could expect, what they should be thinking about. And we went out and just got our message out as far as we could across the northern part of the state, throughout Clark County. And at that time, the Department of Energy early on was doing a lot of update meetings, and almost everything was in Las Vegas. And so you had people that were upset in the northern part of the states and out in the rurals. And so at one important I can't even remember what it was. If they were starting to do an environmental impact statement, we took a video camera and we traveled up Highway 95. We went across Highway 80. We went across Highway 50. And we hit all the little towns. And we came back into Las Vegas with this videotape that was about an hour long, with probably 4 or 5 minutes, with ranchers, miners, volunteer fire people, just people who lived throughout the state in various places, offering their opinion. And I think we kind of set a precedent, because we came into this Department of Energy meeting, big gathering, it was at the Desert Inn, I guess, and said, here's Nevadans. You've got this room of people and you're going to give each of them 5 minutes, but these are the people that would deal with this stuff coming along the highways and impacting counties that are only used to taking care of their own county business. Well, if Yucca Mountain came back, I would have to assume from my experience that it would probably show up about like it did the first time, which was really deceitful. The department showed up the first time and said, okay, listen, I know you're upset because we're here to install something that you feel is dangerous and whatever. We understand that there are dangers. We're only here to study. If anything we find does not go along with the guidelines that we've set up for siting, if we find that the mountain will not pass rules that are set up by the EPA and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, then we pick up the shovels, pack things up, and we leave. And we have no qualms about doing that. We can be here or we can not be here, but that's what we'll do. And that was a lie. To put a project like this on an unwilling region or an unwilling state is absolutely wrong, and you won't win. And we wouldn't have fought for almost 30 years if we thought we didn't have a chance of winning. We always sort of thought we would win, because what they were doing wasn't right. The state was opposed to it. And in the U.S., people are supposed to be able to win these battles, and we did.
Well, the Sierra Club is interested in the Yucca Mountain project because we've been interested in the hazards, the impacts of nuclear waste for a very long time. As a matter of fact, the Sierra Club policy that's on our public website dates back 25 years. We still have the problem, what are we going to do with the nuclear waste that's been generated at all the power plants across the nation? So that's the lesson that I've learned from this project, and the advice I'd give to other organizations and other activists. You're in it for the long haul. You've got to be in it for the long haul. There are many different areas in many different ways that a particular project can be intervened and engaged with, and you've got to be there on all the fronts, and it's not going to be over ever. There's always going to be things that you're going to have to watch for, monitor, and then engage in when they come up. As far as telling people what perhaps I would have wanted to have done differently early on, I think one of the most valuable things that we did was engage with other partners in the local area and getting to know other individuals, other important people, other trigger points, other organizations that are interested or can be briefed to the point that yes, they understand that this is something that they are interested in and want to be involved in. That's really vital.
Well, Yucca Mountain is within Western Shoshone Treaty Territory, the 1863 Treaty of Ruby Valley, and the treaty didn't allow for didn't even contemplate the disposal of high-level nuclear waste, a technology that was 120 years after the signing of the treaty. So even our elders, our ancestors that signed that treaty wouldn't have contemplated anything that would have destroyed us as a people. So we think that the repository is a technology, an activity which is beyond the scope of the treaty itself. Many of our people didn't know what was happening at the Nevada test site until later it was revealed. There was some knowledge that weapons testing was going on, and our understanding has been that the United States developed the repository as the next evolution of nuclear technology, and the scientists and the engineers who are working on other activities at the test site, such as weapons testing, felt that that would be a good place that they could continue their development, their jobs. When I became involved back in 1984, my involvement was to address the adverse health effects that we experienced from weapons testing, then we became aware of the Yucca Mountain project at the Nevada test site and took an active involvement. When the Department of Energy adopted the Environmental Protection Agency's radiation protection standard for Yucca Mountain, it used essentially a reasonably maximally exposed individual that lives 11 miles from Yucca Mountain, living a farming lifestyle, gathering their eggs from chickens and, milking cows and getting their water out of a well. And our contention in the atomic safety licensing proceedings was that did not appropriately model Native American lifestyle that we thought would be lived 1,000 or 10,000 years in the future. For me, the experience has been one of becoming wise fast enough. If we do not become wise fast enough and understand the threats to us, we will perish. And it's not just my people, but it's all of us. The other thing to remember is that the most important thing is showing up. We have to show up and we have to participate and know what's happening.
The Band of Paiutes feels that the transportation of the waste across its lands will impact us too much. We've had enough impacts from the above ground testing. The DOE has what they call their Yucca Mountain Interaction Program. And that is a program that is not actually going to the tribes themselves. What I feel about and what the tribe feels about speaking with and consultation with the tribe is you talk to the tribal council. That is who we feel is the tribe. They are the ones that have the actual ability to speak up for us. And they haven't done that very well. They've actually come to the reservation once. My advice is come to the tribes early in the process. Don't bring us along at the very end, which most of the U.S. government actually does to us. And let us know what the project actually entails, because that way we can tell them what we need to have to be able to participate. And we may have to have maybe a vehicle to get around in. We may have to have experts to come to the tribe. We may have to have a lot of we need to have the education of the council, which has never happened. And to me, that's something that, if there was another project such as this, that's one thing that I would actually want to have, and I think the tribe would actually want to have, is to be educated.
In 1987, when they were amending the act, I was back in Washington, and we were actually in the hearing when Yucca Mountain was named. It was kind of interesting because there was no Nevada representatives at the meeting, and Ed Markey of Massachusetts got Steve and I into the room, and by that time they'd already decided that Yucca Mountain was going to be the only site. So they amended the act to enable affected units of local government to get involved. When we first started working on the EIS, somebody made a decision in DOE that we were considered to be part of the public and not really a full partner. And I think somehow, if this ever would come back, I think DOE or a federal agency needs to be dispelled of the notion that they know what's good for us, or we'll take your comments at a proper time. I think one thing, obviously, you don't want it to be necessarily part of the team, but you want to have a role strong enough to be able to interject your issues. The Clark County needs to be involved in just about every aspect of the program. That was kind of the philosophy I had, that really we couldn't pick and choose. We sort of had to get involved in the engineering part of it, the socioeconomic, a little bit of everything. And I would hope that that would be the kind of the way future programs would work. I would advise future government entities and the public that to work closely with Congress to ensure that there are adequate resources both for governments to get involved, and also for any particular
affected party.
In my mind, the most important thing is that we have to provide independent assessment of the science. So the most important thing for us to do is to produce independent models and take a look at things in a totally different way from what DOE has done. Our basic philosophy was to try to determine whether or not the models that the Department of Energy developed were the best models or whether or not they were alternative ways of looking at things. And we decided the best tack was to try to develop alternative models that in many respects countered the models produced by DOE. And we also felt the best way of doing this was to get peer review of our models. So we decided very early that what we would do would be to try to publish almost everything that we did. And this would serve as a basis for the credibility of the science. You know, early on, when we started in 1986, the Department of Energy and their scientists didn't really take us seriously. So we very quickly had to show them that what we were doing was high quality. So I think that was one of the most important things that we had to do early on. So we attended as many meetings as possible. We showed, for example, the scientists who work for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission that we were doing good work, and we got them on our side. So after a while, DOE could no longer discount us. They had to basically listen to us, because basically we were known in the scientific community. They knew we were doing good work. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the other panels that evaluate DOE's work, had heard us speak, and they realized that we were doing reasonable work. So it took a while to gain the credibility so DOE would actually take us seriously. It's very important for future scientists to be critical, and also to make sure that they not only are critical, but also make sure that they take a look at past literature. That's one of the things that I've noticed that a lot of not only people working for DOE, but even young scientists do today, is they don't look back and check and see what was done in the past. So for example, if something is not in PDF format on the web, it's very unlikely that they're going to go back and check and read older articles. So I think it's important that you not only think critically about the problem, but you also take a look and see what's been done, that you do your job in terms of reviewing the literature.
You're talking about having to measure something that we haven't really ever attempted to do from a socioeconomic standpoint in the past. And that's been the challenge for the Department of Energy. They've not been able to prove the technical impacts, and we were challenged with designing how we measured the impacts to the communities. As we started to do this work, we were challenged all of the time. Over time, the body of literature has supported what we've done, and we've been through the events of 9/11, which actually clearly demonstrated that the types of impacts that we were talking about could occur, whether it's by the National Academy of Sciences. Our work has been vetted. We have one of the challenges we had, and one of the things that Clark County challenged us to do, was to make sure that the work that we did was of the highest scientific quality and that it was peer-reviewed and published both nationally and internationally, and we've continued to do that. A project of this magnitude is very dynamic and includes many parts, and that each part fits together. It's a holistic thing that you have to look at, and that you have to be able to look at it over time. It is not something that occurs in an election cycle. It's not something that occurs in a decade. It's not something that actually is even going to occur over a generation, because it will be the next generation that will continue to deal with this, no matter what the end result is at this point. This is an issue that is still outstanding, and it is an issue that there are many lessons of how we have to start with the citizens, with the people themselves, and understanding their perceptions and understanding what the cost benefit to them is before we attempt to move ahead, no matter what the science might tell us. We tend to look too short-sighted, and the lessons from Yucca Mountain are actually lessons that can influence and should influence a lot of the public discourse today, whether it's about green energy and the challenge of how we make that compatible with the rural areas and how we're going to transport that energy. All of the core issues that we dealt with Yucca Mountain transcend. They have to do with how people interact with government and how we make choices as a whole to deal with a need of society. And those lessons, I think, are very important and should be shared and are of value across many of the challenges we're facing today.
There's no question that the role of the local governments, in my view, is absolutely critical to the success of the siting of any kind of a controversial facility like Yucca Mountain. I think the Department of Energy made some really big mistakes in ignoring a lot of the work that was done by the counties, and Clark County in particular. And that's one of the reasons why we are where we are today, with Yucca Mountain basically on the shelf and having been terminated by the federal government. The Department of Energy came out of the old Atomic Energy Commission background of deciding, announcing, and then defending. It's called DAD. And it doesn't usually sit well with local people. It's very clear to me that if the Yucca Mountain facility was to be resurrected, or if another repository site was to be selected, that a number of changes would have to be made in order to assure that there would be public confidence in the management of that program. And it's kind of interesting that the Department of Energy's approach of deciding, announcing, and defending, that doesn't seem to have now worked here in Nevada, has also been tried in a number of other countries. And in each of those countries, the same thing happened. The government started out saying, this is where we're going to put the repository, and they looked at the geology and they said, this looks like what would be the best site for a long-term facility. And then they talked to the people and said, folks, we're going to put it right here. And there was almost in every case resistance so strong that the programs failed. What I'm suggesting is that if you want to try to site a facility, you've got to work with the local governments right from the start. And you have to be willing to work with them in a transparent fashion so that all the information about the development of the site is being transmitted to the local governments, and the implementing agency really has to be willing to listen to the concerns that are being raised by citizens in the area and address those concerns. And DOE didn't do that. DOE basically said, we're the experts, we know how to do this, trust us. And that doesn't work with people. People have asked me in Washington, D.C., why is it that Nevadans are willing to accept the Nevada test site, but not willing to accept Yucca Mountain? And there are a lot of reasons, because Nevadans, for the most part, are willing to do their best to support national security. And so when it came to bomb testing, they were interested in supporting that. But the difference is that the perception in Nevada has been that the waste that was being produced was mostly being produced elsewhere. None of it is being produced by reactors, because there aren't any in Nevada. But most of that waste was coming from the East Coast, and that's where most of the reactors are. And so those were the folks who were getting the benefit from the electricity that was being produced. And Nevadans felt, well, we're being asked to take the risks of accepting the waste and looking after it for the next 10,000 to 1 million years. And I think that got people somewhat resentful. And the other thing was that the history with the Department of Energy, the assurances that were given by DOE about bomb testing and the effect of fallout upon people's health turned out not to be reliable. And people remember that.
As a contractor working for Clark County, we felt it was important to have a couple of things. First of all, having an integrated approach so that the campaign itself was synchronized and it was a multi-level communication strategy. We also felt that credibility was absolutely vital. We're dealing with the general public, which means we need a level of trust. Fortunately for us, Clark County already enjoyed a positive reputation, so we started out with trust capital. Because Yucca Mountain was a national and even international controversial issue, it meant that we needed to have objectivity. Objectivity to us meant not being neutral necessarily, because of course we had to represent the position of the Board of County Commissioners, which was a strong opposition to Yucca Mountain. But objectivity to us meant being accurate. We went to great lengths to have independent study, to use statistics from DOE, to use whatever means we could in terms of source, so that we were certain whatever we put out there was absolutely accurate. We started working with the cities in 2006, and it really added a whole new dimension to the outreach campaign, because we were able then to not only coordinate messages between the cities and the local governments in Southern Nevada, but also to gear messages specifically to their residents, which were, they varied a little bit between the city of North Las Vegas and the city of Henderson and the city of Las Vegas and Boulder City and the two Indian tribes, Moapa Band of Paiutes and the Las Vegas Paiutes. They all had a slightly different way of approach for their own residents, so it worked out really great. We found that our practice of establishing and fostering really positive relationships with individual reporters and assignment editors really paid off. It gave a level of knowledge and a level of respect that really helped us when we needed to access and use the news media. I also feel that it's important for us in any kind of campaign like this to be as proactive as possible. Much of public affairs and public relations is reactive. We did have some opportunity to be proactive. For example, in the early days when there were a lot of public hearings, they were often at inconvenient times, inconvenient locations for the public to actually participate. So Clark County would sometimes provide transportation. I also feel that it's important in any social media, and in particular internet and web content, that the public information officer should have control of the content. The other advice that I would have is that internal communication is very important, and I think that we could make a greater effort to include and engage and inform the employees of Clark County.
The Yucca Mountain project is very complex and can be very highly technical. So when it comes to creating learning tools, I recommend that you do it for all levels of understanding, starting with elementary kids, students, high school students, and up to the college level. And besides using the traditional tools and tactics for outreach, including fact sheets, brochures, informational videos, participating in events, and providing presentations, I recommend that you take full advantage of your budget and that you use all available means of technology to you. We're currently living in an era of social media, and we decided to use technology available to us, and we created an audio program known as a podcast. This podcast was put up on our webpage, and the equipment that we used to produce that podcast was fairly inexpensive, and we got tremendous results. We received thousands of downloads within the first few months of producing this podcast. We also created a one-of-a-kind kids webpage that dealt with the environment, the animals, the plants, the insects at Yucca Mountain, and they had a variety of interactive learning tools. On top of that, we also had an electronic newsletter, which we send out every couple of months, and we're always encouraging the public to sign up for this newsletter. So in essence, the advice is do not be afraid of technology. It is very important to engage as many different publics as possible. We specifically approach the Hispanic community, the Chinese community, and the Native American communities. We created a variety of programs in their specific languages, and we always were very mindful of their particular customs and cultural needs. My advice for the future generations who may need to work with Yucca Mountain or a similar project is to work very closely with your opposition In our particular case, we always shared information with the Department of Energy. We collaborated on a number of projects, including videos and podcasts, always with the objective of providing the public with concise and factual information.
Yucca Mountain has been part of my life here in Las Vegas. Surprisingly, when I went to work at the city of Las Vegas in 1984, and I was there for 3.5 years, my priority assignment was the city representative to the nuclear waste issue. And that introduced me to Yucca Mountain. I worked closely at the time with Dennis Bechtel at the county, who was certainly the lead agency in Southern Nevada. So in that role, it was great because the Nuclear Waste Policy Act had just been passed in *84. So we were on the ground floor. We as local government representatives were on the ground floor learning about not only the legislation, but all the devil was in the details. I got elected at the city council, and likewise was a representative of the city on the whole waste issue, and fortunately that has continued at Clark County. I also have served on the state's Nuclear Waste Commission, which has given me a wonderful perspective at the state level, at the county level, at the city level, and the staff level. So when it comes to Yucca Mountain, I have been educated and been fortunate to work with some great people that have done some great things. There's been great lessons learned, certainly from the federal government's perspective. If there's a lesson to be learned, is the Department of Energy and the whole federal approach to Yucca Mountain was wrong from day one. Although the Nuclear Waste Policy Act created this equity nationwide where there'd be 2 repositories and 16 sites evaluated, in a short 3-year period, that turned into Yucca Mountain, you're it, we are going to make that decision, and then everything else is going to be justify that decision. The borderline arrogance of the federal government is a strong lesson to be learned. If, and someday there will be a solution for the storage of high-level nuclear waste, if we can hope that the next go-around, that next solution starts with community involvement. If the DOE had gone into those communities in 1984 and 85 and started an education process and a science overview and a buy-in of the community benefits, they would have had a better opportunity here in Las Vegas or any community to get ultimately support. But coming in as the federal agency that's going to do what they want, where they want, when they want, at all costs, was the mistake, and that's a lesson to be learned. You start with the community that you're ultimately going to impact. From the city and the county and the state's perspective, the lesson learned is a good one that we can carry on for generations, and it's part of the Nevada spirit. It doesn't matter what other people say. It doesn't matter if the newspapers and the media are saying Yucca Mountain's a done deal, Nevada's going to get it. The Screw Nevada bill is, you've won the battle. The lesson for us is never accept that. You stay strong, you build that community support through education and honesty and truth, and we never wavered. There were certainly some profiled Nevadans that said, should we be negotiating with DOE? Should we be talking Yucca Mountain might help us? We stayed firm as a community, at the city, at the county, at the state level, united with one voice, and we fought the battle that many thought was unwinnable. And thanks to our congressional delegation, Senator Reid, certainly at the front of that list, never said give up. Just stay the course. Be strong, be a united Nevada, and you can beat back this horrible legislation. And we did. A great lesson learned. The county's role over the last 25 years has been instrumental because their role has been very focused to address the potential impacts of Yucca Mountain and nuclear waste on Clark County. And although they rarely get the credit they deserve, they have been in a leadership role from day one. And they have stayed true to their mission, which was simply to gather the facts, educate the citizens, and stay vigilant to the overall program through their annual surveys, through their outreach into the school program, through their own edification as far as the different components of the Nuclear Waste Project Act. They have, first with Dennis and certainly since, had taken a leadership role, which not only has proven well here in Southern Nevada, but it's played a great role in assisting the state in their ongoing battles, and regionally and nationally. The nation woke up well into the process and realized if everything's going to Yucca Mountain, it might be coming right through our community with these mega trucks and rails. And Clark County did a lot of the groundwork, laid the foundation for analysis. And again, I can't emphasize enough, factual information, not rhetoric, not promises. Here's what it is. This could happen. This is what we want you to be aware of. So I am certainly proud of the role the county has played, and that role ultimately has led to that unified voice and simply protecting the people of Southern Nevada.
I think this is probably one of the most complex programs that you could work in as a local government employee. We've been very fortunate to have excellent staff and excellent support from county management as well as our elected officials to be able to run the program and do the program elements that we're required to do with a lot of support and integrity. So that really helps. The difficult challenge comes from trying to understand all of the perspectives and elements in this program. You have the legal side, you have the federal policy side, you have the technical and science issues, you have the socioeconomic impacts, and of course, meeting the needs of the public through public outreach and communication. So trying to juggle all those and bring them together without giving one too much preference over the other is probably the most difficult thing we've had to accomplish. But I think, again, we've been able to work out on all fronts, being very strategic and following through and making sure that we did everything within our program with the highest level of credibility and integrity, and keeping in mind that ultimate goal of Yucca Mountain should not move forward, as our commissioners have provided to us in policy and time and again in a resolution that they've adopted for many, many years since 1985. Keeping on that continuous, steady direction has been very helpful. So you're not always moving back and forth with what's my job today. We've always known what our job is. I think from a political standpoint, there are different levels and layers of politics that we've had to deal with. Of course, the national level politics, it's a federal program. So you have that whole dynamic of whether you're talking about federal appropriations and how Yucca has been funded, to how we receive our funding here as an affected unit of local government, to dealing with federal auditors and all the compliance and regulatory issues. National policy, of course, that's changed over the past 3 decades, and especially in the last decade that I've been involved in this program. How the public feels about nuclear also dictates how elected officials feel about nuclear and whether it should move forward. And of course, you can't talk about nuclear power without also talking about nuclear waste. So we have that policy debate on energy issues. We also have national security issues that come into play, and so that happens at the federal level. Then you have the dynamic of the state politics and how it relates to local politics and local government issues, and trying to work in a local government environment while keeping in line with the state's position on Yucca, as well as dealing with all the federal requirements and expectations kind of under the auspices of the Department of Energy, and the state dynamic, of course, at odds with the DOE's expectations of what should happen in this program. You can almost feel caught in the middle as a local government, and trying to balance all that and keep in mind what your mission is and your goals are as a local government, bringing forward the expectations of the Clark County Commission. Bringing that all together is a huge challenge, but I think we've been very successful at it. The number one lesson that we've learned is don't forget about any potential stakeholder or interested party. As diverse a group as it might be, you can't leave anyone out. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that the federal government made in this issue, was sort of cherry picking what stakeholders they were willing to work cooperatively with or in a positive way with. and it's usually people that agreed with them. We want to make sure that we leave behind the lesson that everyone matters and every opinion counts, and you need to learn how to address it and work with it effectively no matter what that perspective is. One of the things that we want to leave behind as a legacy is a body of work that can be used by anyone who comes after us in this program. Whether it's used here in Southern Nevada because we have a program similar to Yucca Mountain that future generations have to deal with, or some other project of similar nature that those in government need to learn what we learned all these years to be able to provide the protection and the oversight that we have provided. Should Yucca Mountain somehow be revived in the future, all of that body of work will be retained, and Clark County as a government and the program managers within Clark County who may be assigned to oversee the program will always be here to protect the citizens of Clark County.